The divorce math that nobody talks about after the age of 45. So divorce is not just an emotional thing. It can be a financial disaster, an earthquake, something that really just rattles and shakes your entire system. And what happens is one house becomes two houses, and one retirement plan gets split in half and becomes two retirement plans. And the life that you thought you were going to have going forward, all the travel plans, who you were going to do it with, what your vision of what you thought your life was going to be going forward, especially if you get divorced after 45, is something that is really challenging and difficult. Even the added on thing is all of a sudden you were with another person and now you might be by yourself. And so for many people like myself, I talk about things from experience. I happened to get divorced when I was 49 years old. And what I realized at 49 years old is I never actually lived ever by myself. So it's one other thing that goes along with all the financial things that we're going to talk about today. If you don't know who I am, my name is Brian Lessinger, and I've been in the real estate business for almost 30 years. I've been a degree in money and finance, and I've been talking about this stuff for over 25 years. Typically, I talk to younger people, but today we're going to talk about a topic that I'm starting to see more and more as I sit in more and more living rooms, and especially ever since COVID happened, it just seems like a lot of people got divorced. And so now what they thought was their financial future, what they thought was enough money saved up maybe for retirement, what they thought was equity in a house that's now being all divided by two, and starting from scratch becomes a lot scarier, more difficult situation. So that's what we want to talk about today. We got three major points that we want to address. So we're going to talk about those right now. So point number one is this. Divorce can turn one very financially stable household into two separate, very fragile households. And what do I mean by that? Well, I've talked to many of my friends like this, and some people stay in their marriage for this reason, is that if all of a sudden you start chopping everything in half, or if you happen to be someone who's younger that might have younger kids, and now you start talking about child support and alimony and shared custody and all these other things, it can take a situation that you've built up over maybe 10 or 20 years to get into a decent or good financial situation, and all of a sudden now you're not. So again, let's go ahead and use myself as an example. When I was in my late 30s, a decade before I got divorced, we were in a horrible financial situation. We owned a real estate company. The market went to hell. You know, that whole Great Recession thing happened in 07, 08, 09, depending on what part of the country you live in. And all of a sudden we went from making good money to not making good money. And we were in a fragile situation then. So we knew what it felt like. Fast forward a decade later when we got our financial house in order and we were actually in an amazing financial position when we got divorced, it made it a lot easier for us to sit down at the table and divide up our stuff that we all had, we made it all together and kind of go from there. But if all of a sudden, you know, you're worth X amount of dollars and now you're dividing everything by half and you're going from one household to two households. So now your expenses might be double, or you're now trying to handle the expenses by yourself, or your financial, you know, your retirement accounts are getting slashed in half. Or for many people like myself, which I found very interesting because I had met my wife in college and I'd never really lived in a household where it was a one income house. All of a sudden, even someone like myself, who I make great money and I'm in a great financial position, all of a sudden it was one income. So if I wasn't earning money, nothing was going into the bank account. So it was just a change in mindset. It was very interesting to see. And when I moved into a house for the first time and lived by myself, it definitely wasn't just fragile financially, but it was a lot of other things. And it happened to me right before COVID. So you weren't even really allowed to go out in the world. So there's a lot of interesting things that happen when, you know, you get divorced, let's say later in life or midlife, and it's not just about the money, but it's very, mentally confusing for a lot of people. But you kind of have to do all the things you always did, and you're just now doing it by yourself, which can be a pro and a con because you're getting to make all your own decisions and not having to worry about what somebody else says. So just know, mentally, you got to get your game sharp. So we can talk more about that in detail. All right. So point number two, and this is the one I deal with personally the most, is that the house. If you own a house, this becomes the most emotionally charged, most difficult piece everybody has to deal with, especially if you're, let's say you're 45 and you got 8, 10, 12, 14-year-old kids, teenagers, whatever the case may be, where now your kids may have grown up in this house. The equity in that house might be all the money that you guys have together. And now you're trying to figure out, do we sell it and split the equity? Does the husband get to stay? Does the wife get to stay? Who gets to keep the house? Where are the kids going to live all the time? And this is a huge one that people have to kind of figure out. Typically, what I see is one of two things. Either they sell and split the equity because neither one of them can afford the house by themselves, or one of them is able to buy out the other. The problem becomes is, especially in today's climate, is if someone has a really low interest rate on the house, buying out that other person becomes very difficult. So sometimes one person gets all the retirement account, while the other person gets to keep all the equity in the house. And so there's some ways you can do this. Obviously, you got to talk to your divorce attorney, your CPAs, those kind of people to figure out what might be the best financial situation for both of you. But I will say it is the most emotionally charged. It is the highest, point of argument for people in relationships where they're trying to figure out, well, I should get it or you should get it or what are we going to do? And so just know this is something where I sit in lots and lots of living rooms. And a lot of times by the time I get to it, they've already decided they're getting divorced or they're keeping really quiet about being divorced. Or maybe it's just part of I get a letter from an attorney that says, here's what we need to be doing going forward. So there's a lot of dynamics going on as far as this goes. But I will tell you this, the house and all the real estate is kind of the biggest thing emotionally that goes on with that stuff. So you just have to understand, in a perfect world, the relationship is well enough where the two of you can sit down with someone like myself together and we can make some decisions and think about some things that works out best for both of you. But just know, it's not the end of the world. We'll be able to figure these things out. And one of you in the short term may be renting, or in the short term, you both might end up renting. But just know this is a huge piece that we just have to figure out. Point number 3 is that especially if you're 45 and over, protecting your time, protecting your cash flow, protecting your already retirement funds, and all hopefully very smart financial things that you did going forward is how the two of you are going to win after a breakup. And I've seen it, whether it's 2 men, 2 women, a guy and a gal, it doesn't matter who's involved. It's trying to say to yourselves, especially if you've been together for a long time, is we worked our asses off and worked really hard to get into the hopefully positive financial situation that we are in. And let's not let the fact that we're going to go our separate ways or however your relationship's going to work going forward wreck your financial situation. I've seen it happen over and over and over where people fight and lose hundreds of thousands of dollars and take years and years and years to get divorced. When in reality, if you've already decided to go your separate ways, this is when it's really time to put on your big girl pants, your big boy pants, and make some decisions that are going to honestly be best for both of you going forward. And especially if you have kids, because if you're wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars on attorneys and fighting and losing equity in your house because maybe now is a great time to sell it and you didn't and you waited 2 years, now the value went down, whatever the case may be, you have to understand that fixing your financial situation going forward, especially now that you're already a little emotional and a little nervous and probably a little scared about trying to do everything on your own, let's leave ourselves with as much money in the best financial situation as possible. So if you are someone who has questions about this, wants to reach out to me about this is and can be a very emotional, scary situation. I've been there personally, and I've helped lots and lots of people go through it, especially in that house selling piece. And in my area, I do know my CPA, I do know attorneys, I do know lots of people that have done this. Unfortunately, it's kind of the nature of our business sometimes. Like I said, you think you're getting a real estate and you're going to help everybody in a first-time home buyer and a move-up buyer, and now you have kids and you need a bigger house and buying rental property. Things can be all for positive things, and then you realize a lot of this stuff is not for so much positive things. So you got to be careful with the math, the numbers, the finances, especially if you're someone 45 and over, because we do not have that 40, 50-year time horizon that someone might have in their 20s in order to recover from this. So the least amount of damage you can do to your finances, the better. So if you have questions, reach out to me. Happy to help you walk through the process, and just understand you can both win at this game. You can both people going their separate ways can win at this game. And it's something that you need to be very cautious and careful with. So with that being said, reach out. Hopefully we'll see you on another video very soon.